Hey everybody, Brett from Love Bets and the Belfry here for a new video, a new worst to first video. Huge scaredy cat growing up. This series, at least the first couple films, legitimately got me into the horror genre, and I wanted to at least celebrate that. The Saw series, I got the little collection in the background here. I actually do have Saw 10. I forgot to grab that. Whoops. We know how these work. Obviously starting worst and then making our way up to first. Starting at the very bottom, I would say this is one that is one of the only ones, I would say actually probably is the only one in the Saw series I legitimately didn't care for, and that's Spiral from the Book of Saw. Chris Rock is a big Saw fan, which I think is pretty awesome. I actually have no beef with Chris Rock whatsoever as far as his acting, or I think he's a pretty funny dude, and some of his early comedy is really funny. Seeing that he was going to be in a Saw movie, I actually thought that was pretty cool, and I was looking forward to watching it. Didn't really hit the mark whatsoever. This point in the Saw series, it was a little bit I wouldn't say dead in the water, but it really needed something to kind of get people interested in the series again. And unfortunately, Spiral didn't really do that for me. I could take Chris Rock as a serious actor, maybe in something else, or at least this is one of those times in a movie with say Chris Rock being in a horror movie. I think if he played up his comedy a little bit, not go overboard, but if he was kind of just he plays a detective in this, and if he played up the whole kind of a sarcastic cop or whatever, I think it would have worked a little bit better as far as him being in a Saw movie. Yeah, he really hammed up trying to be legitimate serious in this, and it just didn't work. This had Samuel L. Jackson in it too, and this movie just didn't really do anything. Darren Lynn Bousman, who did Saw 2, 3, and 4, you would have thought it would have been a little bit better, but unfortunately it didn't really hit the mark. I didn't like the twist, and this is one of those Saw movies I have watched once. I don't really see myself going back and watching it again. I just remember the trap at the very beginning of the movie that involved someone's tongue or lips or something like that. Basically, it was a thing over their mouth, kind of like the Venus flytrap thing. That was brutal, but other than that, I really don't remember a lot of moments from this movie really working. The twist was pretty easy to see coming. So ultimately, this is one, yeah, it's just not really worth your time. If someone wants to get into the Saw series, I would say you're okay to skip this one. Next up from that, I wouldn't say I straight up dislike this movie, but this is one of those where it's kind of like what I said with Spiral. It was the series wasn't dead in the water, but you kind of needed something to kind of spruce it up, and this was the first sequel in quite a while. They closed the chapter on Saw for quite a little bit, and then they kind of brought it back with Jigsaw. Yeah, this one, another one of those where you didn't have a lot to work with, honestly. It's not told to you, but basically Jigsaw is a prequel movie. And the thing is, another twist about Jigsaw is just you had yet another accomplice to John Kramer. I just didn't really buy it at this point. You had Amanda, you had Detective Hoffman, you had Dr. Gordon. You already had 3 accomplices of Jigsaw and right-hand people to Jigsaw, and and yet you added another person. It was you can't really buy it because it was there was no hint of just some other person getting things done and pulling strings. So to me, it was the fact it was a prequel movie and then you had this other accomplice to Jigsaw. It was well, where was he the rest of the series? So to me, it didn't really make sense as far as that goes. And you could tell that this was a prequel movie because some of the traps, I think some people probably like some of the traps of this movie, but you could tell it was almost the traps had the beginning stages and not the finished product of something. I don't know if that was on purpose or it just felt that way, but definitely seeing some of the traps, I was some of them seem pretty simple, and not that there's anything wrong with a simple Saw trap, but it felt it was just in the rough draft stage of the traps. So Jigsaw is one of those that was just it was fine. I didn't hate it. Yeah, just one of those the plot twist, because you always have to have some big twist in the Saw movies. One funny little anecdote about this movie though, that I guess I will hold Jigsaw in high regard just based on this little anecdote, is my wife and I went to see Jigsaw in the movie theater, and there was 3 guys that were sitting in front of us, and they were just minding their own business. But throughout the movie, I noticed one guy had big curly hair. I would see his head tilt like this, and so legitimately you can't help but think okay, the dude was falling asleep, and it was like that for a lot of the movie. And so at the very end of the movie, right when the credits started rolling, the dude's head was tilted and he was that was good. And yeah, my wife and I all the time, we're always like, that was good. I don't know. It's just a little silly story there. Yeah, Jigsaw is just kind of whatever to me. Jigsaw, I don't really, same with Spiral, is like, I don't really have a desire to go back and watch Jigsaw. Next up is, I would say this is a movie that is just kind of whatever. It has some good moments in it, but this is kind of just a whatever movie that has an awesome ending, and that's Saw, the final chapter. Saw 3D, I think is what it was called at the time it was released. I think this was in 2009, and this was when like 3D was kind of starting to make a little bit of a comeback in movies, and so they had Saw 3D, and I think it was My Bloody Valentine 3D that same year. They were released in 3D, and I saw this in 3D. Very gimmicky, and there actually weren't a whole lot of moments where you were like, the 3D really came into effect. There was like a couple saw traps where like the result of the death was like blood and stuff like splattered towards the screen and stuff like that. Yeah, it was kind of gimmicky for the time. So I think when they went to release it on DVD and like Blu-ray, they just called it Saw, the final chapter. And in the horror genre, when you release a movie that's called the final chapter, we know that that brings that series to its very definitive end. Right? I would say the traps are actually probably some of the better ones of the series in the final chapter. And I like that in this movie, they were like, no one's surviving any of the traps. Like, everyone's just gonna have a brutal death. And it's one of those things where you're just like, yeah, they weren't great people, so, you know, it's fine to just kill them off in a brutal way. The beginning trap, it was that love triangle where it was like the two guys and the girl. It was like she was involved with two of these guys, and she was like trying to manipulate both of them into killing each other, because it was like she was propelled from the ceiling, and so one of them ended up having to die, and it's like the two guys were like fighting each other, and then finally someone was like, dude, just stop, like, you see what she's trying to do. And so that's a pretty satisfying one. Someone who's manipulative and tries to get their way no matter what. How that trap ended up in a public space in front of everyone walking by it, it's a good opening. Yeah, the traps are pretty good, but the movie itself is kind of meh. The flashback scene involving Jigsaw is hilarious. Jigsaw goes to meet the guy who wrote the book where he pretended he survived a saw trap, and to like de-age Tobin Bell a little bit, he literally wore a hat backwards. Best Fred Durst impression. Yeah! You think Detective Hoffman is, you know, he kills Jigsaw's ex-wife. Hoffman's gonna get away from everything, and then he's confronted and, you know, like someone dressed up as a pig. And I was like, it's gotta be like, I saw this in the theater, I was like, it's gotta be Dr. Gordon. And when he takes the mask off, everyone's like, yeah! Like, it was great. Hoffman meets his demise is very satisfying. Pretty typical whatever Saw movie to see that ending. I would have been completely content with that being the definitive end. You know, have definitive ends when they call it the final chapter. Next up is Saw 5. The reason I would rank this a little higher than the final chapter is just the movie overall itself, I think, is just a little bit more interesting as far as Detective Hoffman's backstory and how he gets involved with John Kramer. You do have a group of people going through different traps through Saw 5. The last trap that the two surviving people have to go through drain like 10 ounces of blood into this thing, and they would have had a much easier time if everyone had just worked together. So the two surviving people basically had straight up die of blood loss. Pretty gnarly. Of course, you had Detective Strom, or Luke from Gilmore Ghouls, being the detective trying to go after Detective Hoffman. No one really believed that Detective Hoffman was behind really anything. I think they retconned that a little bit in Saw 6. Strom was like the only person who was like, I'm on to you. He was basically like the Dokes of the Saw universe. But I did think it was kind of clever with the end where Strom throws Hoffman into that like coffin that had broken glass in it, thinking it was like Strom, but it actually wasn't. Like, it was meant for Hoffman's. So like the whole room closes in on Strom, which is pretty ridiculous in hindsight thinking about that. But I feel like reading online, not a lot of people really liked Saw 5 a whole lot, but it's not too bad. Next up is the one before Saw 5 is Saw 4. I like Saw 4 a good bit. It had the one like cop that was involved in Saw 3. He ended up finding that, what's her name? I think it's Carrie or something like that from Saw 3. He basically has a hard time taking orders, let's just say that. So the main guy in Saw 4, like, if he had just listened, he wouldn't have found himself in like these horrible situations. I would say the Donnie Wahlberg's character from Saw 2, like still being alive. I didn't really like that twist that he was just still happened to be alive. I guess it was just plot convenience. Darren Lynn Bousman was definitely experimenting with scene transitions in Saw 4. Like there's one point where one girl is like a scalp trap or whatever, and he rescues her and she immediately tries to kill him. And so he like throws her through like a glass door, and then it just transitions back to the police station as she goes through like the glass door. Very interesting. It's kind of like unintentionally funny watching it. While I didn't like Donnie Wahlberg's character still being alive, like the whole like ice block slowly melting, and then Detective Hoffman is in the electric chair thing, so it's like as the water slowly starts to melt, it'll make its way to the electric chair and electrocute Hoffman. We all know how that went. I did like the little autopsy scene in the beginning though of John Kramer, where it cuts into his stomach and there's a freaking tape there. So it's like, just explaining this is just hilarious. Not one of the better sequels, but it is better than what I had listed before, so it's still entertaining, I would say. Next up is the newest one in the franchise, at least up at this moment I'm recording this. There's 10 Saw movies, and that is Saw 10. Honestly, kind of revived this series as far as interest in it. They did something different and took a big risk, and it surprisingly paid off pretty well. Saw 10 is a lot of fun. Saw 10, having John Kramer basically be our protagonist, shockingly worked really well. And I think it was because John Kramer's backstory, it is pretty tragic, and so goes to like Mexico because there's this experimental doctor possibly could cure John's cancer permanently. And so yeah, I mean, not that I've had cancer before, but if you have cancer, like, you pretty much would probably be willing to do anything, especially if you truly want to go on and live your life. I could get behind that, and how it's executed actually was really convincing. You watch the first Saw movie, you're just kind of like in theory this shouldn't work. You come across the doctor who does the whole surgery. It turns out it's just a total con artist and a group of people that are just terrible people, and the lady behind it turns out to be way worse. So it's like you are rooting for Jigsaw. As far as like continuity with the rest of the series, it is a little lost on that. I like that his ruthlessness didn't actually fade, because once he gets screwed over by this doctor and everything, the Jigsaw out of him immediately. Yeah, you're like, please, she needs to bite the dust. I mean, maybe the kid aspect of John Kramer kind of befriending this kid and then him being in a bad situation obviously needed to be plot convenience, for people to get on John Kramer's side. So I think that was kind of a cheap ploy. This is a very enjoyable Saw sequel. I mean, obviously with Tobin Bell being a lot more up there in age, and especially Shawnee Smith, who played Amanda. Amanda's in this movie because it takes place between Saw 1 and 2. Obviously, of course, they're older actors, so it's like you kind of just have to get over the fact that these actors are older. So if you can get past that, I think you'll be fine watching Saw 10. It's a pretty enjoyable one in the series. Next up is Saw 3. It had a very finale feel to it at the time. The fact is, you're killing off your horror villain, in the third movie. They went on to make many more sequels after this. I mean, I think the clear picture was the series was making money, so it's like they wanted to continue it somehow. It definitely had a finale feel to it. I like a lot of the traps in this movie. The one that involved pigs, probably one of the most disgusting ones of the entire series. Poor guy that got trapped in there. He basically was chained, he's stuck to the floor. He had a thing around his neck that was bolted to the floor, and just all these pigs getting slaughtered and all this slop just being thrown on him. One of the more disgusting, screw bones breaking and people getting torn in half, that one was more gross than any of the others in this series. Yeah, the protagonist that has to go through the trials and tribulations of that whole Saw trap because his son was struck by a drunk driver or whatever, or I don't know if it was a drunk driver. I can't remember that aspect of it. His kid ends up dying and that whole thing. Yeah, you kind of feel for the guy a little. Yeah, he couldn't come to terms to forgive the person who killed his kid. I like the aspect that, the guy who did kill his kid by accident, he truly felt awful about it. I like that aspect of that struggle. You want them to pay, but it was the dude really did pay for it, because you could tell he was a good human being under it all. I mean, the rack trap was enough to just, that was awful. But the rack trap, I think, is a pretty iconic Saw trap. I think it's there as one of the best Saw traps, honestly. The rat trap was great. Towards the end of the movie, the doctor who gets kidnapped to try to fix John Kramer's brain cancer, she does this really crazy experimental surgery and like cuts part of his skull out to take pressure off of his brain. That's a pretty gnarly scene. She has that whole like collar thing around her neck, so that was pretty innovative. And of course, you know, being a Saw movie and a horror movie, you're like, obviously, it's like Chekhov's gun. It's gonna have to go off at some point. Yeah, how everything, you know, wraps up. Jake Saw getting his throat slit by Jeff, the main guy. He was just so full of vengeance. That was crazy. You know, Amanda getting legit shot like right in the neck and is bleeding out on the floor. And then Jeff, like the doctor who's like trying to help John who got kidnapped. It's like, oh, that was Jeff's ex-wife, I think, or something like that. So it's like, that's insane. And because both of them end up dying, they can't help the lady with the collar thing around her neck. So bullets are gonna go off there, and you see the aftermath right at the very end. Yeah, it goes out with a literal bang. So it definitely, especially, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but I think the director's cut is like, it like plays up the end even more, like with all its editing and everything. So it truly felt like a finale, like this series. And if they had ended the series on that, honestly, it would have been a good end to the series. Like it went out with a literal bang. It made too much money, and if it's Halloween, it must be Saw. The top 3 here. Next up is Saw 6. Saw 6 is honestly, like, I think Saw 10 took a lot from Saw 6, and they took like what worked with Saw 6 and like applied that to the plot of Saw 10. Because Saw 6, you do feel bad for John Kramer. The whole story of this one is just John goes to this insurance company. He obviously has cancer, and he's trying to basically ask for coverage. And like one of the top guys in this insurance company is basically refusing to help John with his cancer treatments and everything. Yeah, so it's like you mess with the wrong guy, man. So it's, yeah, this insurance like CEO or whatever, you know, has to go through this whole thing, and what he gets to see, the horrors he gets to see, like, you know, the big twist of family whose like dad dies because, you know, this insurance CEO refused to help this family's dad with his treatments. He ended up passing away. So the mom and the kid are just like sitting in this cage or whatever, and then they see like this big tank of like hydrofluoric acid, and so it's like they get to choose whether they think it's for them or something. And so at the very end, it's revealed like where he sees like the family. The mom, you know, the mom is very forgiving and is just like I can't do it. I can't make this decision. The kid's like an angsty teenager. Of course, he's just like, you killed my dad, and he's just like, he like pulls the lever on where it says dies. And just like the dude just gets like impaled with this stuff and then like injected with hydrofluoric acid, and like he just falls to pieces. It's awesome. Usually a lot of stuff behind the Saw movies is like, you know, these people are doing terrible things, so of course you don't mind them like facing a horrible fate, you know. But yeah, Saw 6 is great. You had like the cat and mouse game of Detective Hoffman and Jill that, you know, that pays off in the final chapter as well, with what Jill ends up doing to Detective Hoffman at the end was pretty gnarly. You know, she puts him in the reverse fly trap thing on his face, and he somehow is able to get himself out of it, but it basically tears like half his jaw open. Pretty gnarly. Just the execution of Saw 6 is genuinely great. Yeah, seeing this in theaters, I was just like, this is definitely one of the better ones of the series. I was shocked at this point in the series with Saw 6 being like as good as it is. Very enjoyable one. Definitely within the top 3. All right, top 2. Top 2 are, and you can kind of expect, you know, what I'm gonna say here, but second place is Saw 2. Saw 2 was very, you know, fresh in the series. We have probably our most iconic group of characters in Saw 2. Everyone's pretty memorable, going through like, you know, this old house and having to face these different traps. And I like the very unknownness of Saw 2 as far as that goes, because it's like they actually are having to solve like a puzzle and such, and like the whole house is like has this like gas, and they have to like get out by a certain point because slowly it's like killing their lungs or whatever. You know, people remember Amanda being thrown in the pit of needles. Like it's hard not to remember that. Very memorable part of the series. I like Shawnee Smith, the behind the scenes in that. Those were like actual, obviously they didn't have legit needles in them, but they were actual syringes. When Shawnee Smith got like thrown in that pit, like she's like, yeah, like what you see on the movie, like that's my genuine reaction to getting thrown in there because it really hurt. I was like, yeah, that checks out. I liked the back and forth between I forget Donnie Wahlberg's character's name. It's like not there right now. But the back and forth between Jigsaw and him, just like the whole interrogation thing, you know, while Donnie Wahlberg's son is like in this saw trap and such, and like he's like, I need you to listen to everything that I tell you to do, because you're gonna have to, if you want to see your son again, you're gonna have to listen and sit here with me and talk to me. And if Donnie Wahlberg's character's a hothead, so that ends up boiling over towards the end of the movie, and most of the characters trying to get through this trap is super memorable. You know, there's the one guy that has to like crawl through like that one like fireplace thing to get one of the needles, because there was like, you know, this antidote that's supposed to like help them or whatever. I don't know if it's like a gas in the house or it was they were all poisoned or something. I can't, there's so many movies in the series with little details, and as the series goes on, of course, it's like it gets more and more convoluted with everything and keeping everything straight of like who did this and who was behind this type thing. Yeah, Saw 2 is, I would say it's probably one of the most rewatchable ones of the series. I dare I say it's probably more rewatchable than Saw 1, just because Saw 1 is a masterclass of storytelling. Saw 2 is just, it's easier to just put on and just watch, you know, casually, because it's easy to follow. And yeah, this is like, this was the perfect like follow up to the first one, where it was like Jigsaw was a huge mystery in the first one, and Saw 2 is like where you really get to know Jigsaw better and like what, you know, happened to him and his backstory. You know a little bit in Saw 1, but it's not a whole lot revealed. Tobin Bell plays a very small presence in the first Saw movie, and Saw 2 is like he gets to shine a little bit more in his scenes. Saw 2 is really enjoyable. I watched Saw 1, 2, and 3 like religiously when these movies were first coming out. I really loved them and really got me into the horror genre, like I said earlier. Yeah, Saw 2 is like, that's the first one to obviously put on after you watch Saw 1. If you really love Saw 1, watch Saw 2. I don't really know anyone who has a huge problem with Saw 2. I think it's executed really well. You know, the big twist of Saw 2 that Amanda is an accomplice to Jigsaw, you know, her surviving the trap that she was put in, like I think it works really well. Things with accomplices get a little bit ridiculous towards the end of the series, or to this point in the series, but Amanda being an accomplice kind of makes sense. Saw 2 is really good. We have our last one. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, this like turned people on their heads when this came out, and that's the very first Saw. I mean, I haven't seen the short Saw film that was made prior to this feature-length one that came out that most people know. James Wan knocked it out of the park with this one. Leah Whannell's acting, not the best actor, obviously, but Leah Whannell is a very, very creative mind in the horror world, and I have a huge amount of respect for him. His character of Adam is actually very good. I think he's a really solid character, despite, you know, Leah Whannell really hamming it up out of scenes. And then Carrie Ells playing Dr. Gordon. The very beginning of this movie, you're just like, it just sucks you in immediately. You just want to know what's going on. Why are these people trapped in this bathroom, sawed to, you know, chained to a pipe and everything, and there's a dead body in the middle of the floor? Like, that is like one of the best like concepts you could come up with for a horror movie, and then go from there. Obviously everyone knows the big twist to this movie, and like one of the better like twist endings to, I would say, a movie ever. Like, I mean, the first time I saw this, it genuinely blew my mind that Jigsaw was the dude laying in the middle of the floor and just gets up at the very end of it. You're just like, what the heck, man? One of the few times like in this series where like the big twist of it was like, oh, and you know, that's what dawned with all the sequels, where it's like, you have to have some big twist. So I'm sure a lot of pressure was there for people to come up with a big twist. But yeah, I honestly have no notes for the original Saw. I would just say Adam gets kind of screwed over at the very beginning, because when he wakes up in the bathtub and the water drains out, like the key goes into the bottom of the drain. So it's like, I mean, then again, it was like Adam searched a lot of the general area for a key, didn't find anything. I would have thought he would have wanted to check the drain, unless it like really went down the drain so you couldn't see it. He kind of got screwed over in that aspect, and you kind of feel bad for Adam by the end of the movie. And Dr. Gordon was like, he was going to do anything, and the fact, you know, he had to saw his own leg off to just get through. And one of the biggest unanswered absurd like moments of the Saw series up until Saw the final chapter. You were just like, where's Dr. Gordon? Is he dead? He's either dead or he's doing something with, John Kramer. So it was one of those things when it revealed that he was a big right-hand man to Jigsaw. It was, kind of one of those like not surprised, but very satisfying, as far as that goes. Those are my Saw rankings, worst to first. Saw is a classic and is going to continue to be a classic. I don't think they should ever remake the first Saw movie. I know a lot of people want the Saw series to reboot itself. I mean, it kind of did that with Spiral, but it didn't really work. So I don't think they should really try to remake Saw whatsoever. I think it's perfect the way it is. If you've stuck to the end, thank you all very much for watching. Everyone's got their own rankings of these, horror franchises. So if you have one, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. This is just my ranking, so just wanted to tell it. So thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you in a future video. Bye.